What is up, everybody? Welcome in to the Staples Show, Shout to Buffalo Bills Football Podcast. It's Ryan Talbot, Matt Parrino. We got a lot to get in today. It's Ravens week, right? Like the first three games of the season happened. We've talked about this hot start a ton after the game on Monday night, and now it's on to the portion of the schedule that is going to get really interesting, Ryan, with three straight games on the road against the Ravens, Texans, and Jets. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. And, you said it well there. These are three tough games on the road. The Bills have obviously answered every call through the first 3 weeks, but this is that next segment now. If you want to break these apart into 3-game segments, this is another big, tall task ahead of the Bills.
Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. It really helps us out a lot. We'll get into a ton of stuff today. Some injury updates from Orchard Park today. Obviously, the Josh Allen comments that were made after the game on Monday night that kind of took on a life of their own. We'll get into that. The whole situation with Stefon Diggs, Allen's response today. And I know there's like a good chunk of people who are probably so sick of this storyline with Stefon Diggs, and we're going to get into that too. So just hear us out on this one. I think this is going to be the final exclamation point on this thing, and definitively that when the Texans and the Bills play soon. But Shout is brought to you as always by Tops Friendly Markets. Right now, it's the rush to the Tops Red Zone. Get game day ready with Tops and score big with savings, winning recipes, and everything you need for the ultimate game day experience. Head to the Tops Red Zone in store for all your game day essentials and more. Shout out to Jim Payne, 1 month official as a member on the YouTube side. And you can join the YouTube membership club here. I think it's a couple bucks a month. And what it does is it highlights your comments on the side, so we can always kind of bring them more easily into the show. Excited to finally be able to watch a live show. Jim, I believe, is an insider as well on the tech side. Get more into that, but let's get into this Josh Allen story from today, Ryan, because I didn't make a ton about it after the game on Monday. Josh had a quote where he said it's really wonderful, it's fun, and it's wonderful when you have a lot of, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't have the quote in front of me, have a lot of players that aren't concerned about stats, right, or touchdowns, and I think that was in response to a question about this everyone eats mantra, the way that the Bills have kind of went into this thing this year with the idea that everybody is going to have a chance to have big games, but it's not going to be everybody having a big game every single week. And I think that it's easy to extrapolate that quote and then apply it to the situation that happened with Stefon Diggs over the last couple of years. And, maybe his level of unhappiness. Obviously, the story came out in GQ a couple weeks ago, and we talked about that and his time in Buffalo and maybe the identity change and everything that goes into all of that. And the national talk radio shows and TV show, Stephen A. Smith, I saw a video where the headline of the video was Stephen A. Smith says Stefon Diggs has to respond to Josh Allen. And Josh Allen is in tune with this stuff. Like he scrolls on Twitter just like everybody else that has that horrible habit. And what's funny about the insider text line, Ryan, sidebar, people text us all the time and say, man, this text line is great because I've been able to quit Twitter or X completely. So that's kind of funny. But he sees this, and he sees the way that people ran with that quote. And I think today he was asked a question about the wide receivers, the everyone eats mantra, and how much that's encouraging, that people are like, they're walking the walk, as opposed to just talking the talk and not living that. And he responded by saying, listen, I know people are trying to make this a thing, him and Stefon Diggs, the beef between Diggs and Allen. We know that game's on the horizon. And he basically came back and said, it's not a thing. It's, I love 14. He said Stefon Diggs. And it's just about focusing on what they are today with the group that they have today. And I think he's just trying to like put an end to this storyline, although it's not going away with Texans up next.
No, it won't go away because, like you said, that game's on the horizon. It won't go away because when you hear a soundbite like that, no one is upset when the ball doesn't come their way. Along the lines of what he said, where they truly are just about winning. They're okay if they're not the primary targets. When you hear something like that, those national voices are going to spin it into this is a shot at Stefon Diggs, who wanted the targets, wanted the workload. And it's very easy for the talking heads on national TV shows to do that. So it was good that he was able to come out today and address it specifically when you kind of, I don't want to say push back, but when you followed up with that original question about the walking the walk, talking the talk, when he insinuated that people were trying to make something out of it. But it was nice to hear him say, I love 14. I still do. Still, appreciates that relationship, and talked about how to build something up that they have now in Buffalo, you don't have to tear down something else, which was, that previous Bills offense with Stefon Diggs being that focal point. So I get where he's coming from. I get how that can be frustrating because, everyone's watched these first 3 games. The Bills have been a spectacle. 3-0, only team that has scored over 30 points, I believe, in all 3 games so far this season. Everything's going really well for them. So any comment like that, some people are going to take and put a negative spin on it.
Right. And, Pops Mafia, shout out to him. I always see him in the comments here on Shout, but I also see him when I'm walking down the tunnel to get ready for Buffalo Kickoff Live. And there he is up to my left, usually looking to greet Bills players. And I usually give him a wave. He brings up a good point. I mean, I think one of the things that gets lost in all of the drama is that, and I think both Diggs and Allen have an appreciation for this, is that both of them meant a lot to each other in their careers. However it may have ended, and we may never really learn the story on that until maybe one of them is retired or goes on a podcast when it's too far removed and really gives you the details of what happens. And who knows, maybe it'll never come out. Maybe they agreed that, like, whatever was going on there, if anything, like it's just going to stay behind closed doors. That could happen too. It just feels like, I think that the residual, the lingering of this whole situation is just about why it had to end that way. That I think really leaves some fans or even members of the media just befuddled, because it was a pairing that worked so well early. Ryan, you remember the Sports Illustrated Step Brothers spin-off kind of deal where
ride.
Diggs was going for the piggyback ride and everything. And they were, it was a love affair at the beginning. And over time, I think part of it is like when you're not winning the big one and you're not moving on to that, it's frustrating. It's frustrating for all parties. And I think in the end too, and why the other part of the headline here, which I said, why it's time to move on. It's time to move on because I think, even if I don't think the arrow is still pointed up in terms of like career growth or progress for Stefon Diggs, I still think he's in a situation that at least in 2024 can be good. I mean, I think that Houston Texans team has a lot of talent. And I think for what the Bills want to accomplish with what we've seen in the first three games, they're set up for success with this next iteration of their team. And to get to it, I don't think Diggs could have been in the picture. I went and looked at the stats, Ryan. 150 or more targets in each of the last 3 seasons. I mean, you could look at the target share in the first 3 games. We could get through 17 games and maybe nobody has 100 targets on this team. And I don't know how you fit this together if Diggs is still here, knowing you have to feed him. The Texans had to feed him. In a blowout loss last week, they fed him. 10 catches, 94 yards, super low yards per catch, as was the case down the stretch last season, and they lost in a blowout.
Yeah, it's one thing, like you said, he couldn't be in this offense and get that kind of target share. It would almost have to be him accepting a smaller role, which it doesn't seem like that's something he wants to do. He wants to almost go out and prove that he is still a number 1 type of receiver in this league, even though it hasn't necessarily shown in the first 3 weeks in Houston. He kind of has that chip on his shoulder. And he even mentioned that GQ article, something changed when the Bills changed offensive coordinators. And they had a lot of success win-loss wise when they made Joe Brady the interim OC. And they've had a lot of success this year. But you have to sacrifice your stats when, it looks like, at least through these first 3 games. And sure, the target share, a lot of that has to do with the fact that the last 2 games against Miami and Jacksonville, the Bills have pretty much just been running out the clock in the second half of those games because they put the games away at halftime, essentially. In Miami, they needed the pick 6 in the third quarter. But the Jacksonville game was over at halftime, essentially. Josh Allen won an AFC Offensive Player of the Week based on 2 quarters of a game. That's how great he was. but with Stefon Diggs, we've seen how much he was fed in Buffalo, the stat lines he's produced. He wants to still have a stat line like that, and it's possible he could in Houston, and it's possible they win a lot of games. That division is a bit of a mess right now, so no doubt they could still win the division and make a run in the playoffs. But what's happening in Buffalo right now, at least through 3 games, is really working for this team.
And a little bit in terms of like the way that the whole thing happened. Obviously, I asked the follow-up question. You alluded to that a few minutes ago. And, some of the feedback online is like, oh, clickbait or trying to like incite Josh to say something. It's like, no, actually, Josh Allen brought up the subject. It's obviously something he's seen since Monday and made it a point to kind of stamp that out a little bit and kind of fight back against it. Like I said, we didn't really like locally. The Dick story has been pretty much buried. Like occasionally, the big pop up, the GQ story. We talked about it for a few minutes, but that was going to be Houston week, right? But obviously, that quote happened, and for whatever reason, some people decided to blow that up into a Diggs kind of thing, and he's responding to it. And he said it in kind of a general way, like, I know people are trying to make this a thing. Well, make what a thing? Make what a thing? Let's not talk around it. Let's get to the point. And he clarified and he responded. He said, I think you know what I'm talking about. I just wanted to give him the chance to explain specifically what he was talking about since he brought it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, had he just said, you know what I'm talking about, people would have insinuated and people would have again connected the dots, but it was nice to hear him saying his own words. I love 14. I still love him. Talked about, how great that relationship was and that those teams were, but it's a new team. It's where they're building up this core of a roster and he's ready to turn the page. I'm sure Stefon Diggs is ready to turn the page ever since the day he was traded out of Buffalo. So this certainly feels like a story that does need to be put to bed once and for all. Of course, that won't be the case next week when the Bills and Texans face off. That will be probably a talking point on every major show throughout the week leading up to that game. But here locally, like you said, it's much ado about nothing.
And Daryl, our guy over on X and obviously here on YouTube, the national sports media is going to get every ounce of meat off of the Allen versus Diggs story. I 100% agree with that. I mean, anything with Stefon Diggs and Josh Allen connected to each other is going to be good for ratings, is going to be good for conversation. And from a Bills perspective, if you're watching this show and sitting there like, oh man, more Diggs stuff, the point I think that's really important to keep this in the conversation is like the shift, the forward thinking of Brandon Beane, even to the detriment of the cap in 2024, to move off of this thing. This is always going to be something that's worth, exploring and discussing the way you move off a player, when you move off a player, and how it works with the group that they've assembled here today, because it's gone well for the first 3 games. But, there's still a lot of season, a lot of story left to be told in 2024. How does it change? How do things go for Houston? How do things go for this group in Buffalo? So I think it's always going to be on the periphery, but major point is let's move on. Let's move past it. The Houston Texans game is here. We'll get everything out of our system over the next 10 days. And then boom, we are on to what I think is the game of the first half of the season, Bills Jets in the Meadowlands. Because Ryan, the one thing about the storyline between these two teams, the Jets of all the teams in the AFC, and obviously you can make the argument for the Chiefs in the playoffs because they've dominated the Bills, winning 3 games. But I think you can make an argument that the Jets have been the biggest foil, and even though they haven't been good, to this Bills team because of the success that they've had, specifically with their defense against Josh Allen.
Yeah, they've split the last few years with Buffalo. I want to say it might go back as far as the last 3 years. I'd have to double check that. But last year, the week 1 game, ugly game by Buffalo. Rodgers gets injured early. They get out to a little bit of a lead, and then they just kind of let the Jets back into the game, lose it on that return in overtime. Then, though, I will say Joe Brady becomes interim OC, and I believe it was his first game after, maybe second game as interim OC, and they just blow the Jets out of the water. So that was at least a positive sign for that Joe Brady coming in as that interim OC. Hopefully, based on what he's seen out of the Jets so far this season, he can drop a similar type of game plan He's done a really good job through the first 3 weeks in terms of not following the same blueprint against every team. You saw in week 1. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You saw in week 1 how they came out, slow start. Josh Allen plays Superman in the second half. Defense locks down Kyler Murray. Week 2 is James Cook, who was the focal point of the offense. 3 touchdowns. Josh Allen was just kind of a bystander watching that game and happy to do so. And then in this last game, it was offense and defense just swarming, dominating. But they came out passing when they had been very run heavy early in these games. And they were just slinging it around. So the one thing I'll say about Joe Brady going into the Jets game in a few weeks, going into the Houston game next week, and going into Sunday Night Football against a very good Ravens team is he's going to look at tendencies that the Ravens have showed, and he's going to try to model a game plan after that, which is, in my opinion, a big-time green flag for an offensive coordinator, where you're not just going to say, well, this is our strength, and we're going to go in and we're going to do this. And they're, if they can stop us, so be it. He's going to look for weaknesses on that team and try to attack and expose them, whether it's on the ground, whether it's through the air. He doesn't care how it gets done as long as it gets done.
Walter in the comments here, a little action amongst fans talking about, the point Walter brings up, if Shakir, the ideal offseason once the Bills traded Stefon Diggs was they don't need a wide receiver one. We've talked about this in this show. I think that model, there's been a lot of juice behind that model over the last couple of years. I think the Green Bay Packers have been the latest example of it. But his contention is, okay, Stefon Diggs, number one wide receiver, huge target share. You trade him. What happens if Khalil Shakir kind of ascends into that wide receiver role? And do you just turn around and trade him? I don't know. I think that you have to look at it in a more nuanced way. What does Shakir ascending into a wide receiver one do for this offense, right? Like, to me, there are elements to Shakir's game that are just so drastically different than Diggs and what he means for Josh Allen. The reliability. How many games last year, Ryan, do you look at a 10 or 12 or 14 target game for Stefon Diggs, and you got to count up how many of those targets went for incomplete passes? And I'm not talking about drops. I'm just talking about plays that didn't result in a positive play for the offense. Khalil Shakir has been targeted, whatever it is, 14 times this season. He's not dropped a single pass. As a matter of fact, he is currently tied. Check out this stat. It's wild. He is currently tied for the NFL record with, I believe, Michael Thomas, 42 straight targeted passes without a drop or an incompletion. He has a catch on his last 42 targets. His next target, if he catches it, becomes the all-time NFL record holder. And I think it goes back to 1991, the stat, I believe, according to Pro Football Talk. I have to look that up. Anyway, the point of it is Shakir is the way that he wins, what he is in this offense is different than what Stefon Diggs was down the stretch at 30 years old, making $27 million a year last season. And so I do think that Khalil Shakir is an extension candidate. I don't think that the Bills are in any hurry to trade a 26, 27-year-old just entering his prime wide receiver.
And this is a wide receiver who in his extension is not going to get 30 million plus like the Brandon Ayuk's and all these other guys that have cashed in this offseason, because his overall stat line most likely is not going to be as gaudy as what those guys are getting in their respective offenses. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb, big money contract. He's kind of more of a slot guy. Khalil Shakir can do a little bit of everything, and he does everything well. He definitely deserves a pay increase, but it's not the same in terms of the target share, in terms of the looks he's going to get. And I think he realizes that, but he does do everything so well. And you go back to Stefon Diggs year one, you can look at the last year. Diggs could stretch the field a little bit early on in that tenure with Buffalo, the way defenses were playing the Bills. And then when you get to the, how every team is pretty much playing their safeties now, Diggs was more limited. He would catch the ball. He would go down. He didn't take a lot of hits, a lot of contact. The yards after the catch really weren't there all the time. There was a few times, the Miami game last year, he breaks out of 2 tackles and scores a touchdown. But more times than not, he preserved his body, which is nothing wrong with that. Khalil Shakir, he is that yard after catch. That's the one thing that he's really worked on this offseason. in that little piece they did with him and Eric Moulds. He wanted to work on that. You've seen him catch the ball in stride, go for a touchdown in this last game. You've seen him ping pong off of defenders and then keep going forward. He does a lot of things really well. He's that person that when they're going against zone defenses, he's kind of the Cole Beasley in terms of he knows exactly where to sit. So he kind of can take on the role of Cole Beasley. He can do a little bit of what Stefon Diggs did late in his tenure in Buffalo. He's a chameleon in that regard. He does a lot of things extremely well, and the Bills are very lucky to have them, but it definitely would not be a problem if he emerged as a wide receiver type 1 candidate.
We're going to move on to other topics here in a second, but one more thing I want to read this and really kind of zero in on this because it's important. So Tom McMasters on YouTube says, when you title a podcast like this, the title is Josh Allen-Stefon Diggs beef a real thing? Quarterback weighs in. Today, Tom, Josh Allen said people are trying to make this thing a thing, right? So when Stephen A. Smith and everybody else is expounding upon the fact that these two guys have beef, that's what we're talking about on the show today. So I headlined it, what we're talking about. Stick around, pull up a seat, and you'll hear what we're actually talking about, which is also I'm bookending it by saying it's time to move on from this. And guess what? We're not the ones perpetuating it. The local beat, like I mentioned on Monday, didn't string this quote along for any clicks or stories because it was Stefon Diggs material. I don't think anybody on the beat, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody can, wrote a story about Stefon Diggs and Josh Allen over the last 2 days. I didn't.
No one did.
I am now because Josh Allen brought it up on his own today. Then he goes on to say Josh mentioning Lamar's 2 MVPs was him saying he is coming for him when that is not what he implied. I haven't said or written a thing about Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson yet this week, Tom. But welcome in to the Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast. We're glad that you're here. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well, and hang out a little bit. Listen to the show, and we'll have a chat. Join the Insider text line, and you could text me directly and Ryan Talbot as well. 716-528-6727. The Transition King is back, and I am fired up right now, Ryan Talbot, on a Wednesday night. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I just love a fired up Matt Parrino, and that's exactly what we just got right now. I think you answered that pretty well there, Mr. Parrino.
The Shout text line, man. I was in that thing all day today. We had a reply or texts that I had to catch up on. You had to catch up on from back on Monday. And so I was firing some texts out to the group. I was firing out some texts to individuals. You know, this is a daily thing. It's a huge part of our coverage. And I've been telling people, don't wait any longer. Join this thing, 716-528-6727, or go to joinsubtext.com/shoutbuffalobills. 2-week free trial, $3.99 a month after that. And the Insider text line is brought to you by Carrie C. Beyer, attorney with the law offices of Francis M. Litro, located at 237 Main Street in Buffalo, New York. If you or someone you know is seriously injured, give Carrie a call at 716-852-1234 or check out litrolaw.com. All right, injury report time, Ryan. I think the Bills are in a really good injury spot. Of course, you'd love to have Terrell Bernard. You'd love to have Taron Johnson. Shout out to our guy, Joe Biscaglia, who had a bit of a scoop today, caught up with Taron Johnson in the locker room. He revealed that it was a partially broken forearm in week 1, which usually comes with, Joe tweeted, a 4 to 6 week time frame. And he's eyeing a return against the Texans, which is actually something on the Insider text line. I believe we mentioned it on the podcast. That was kind of the game that I was kind of circling as a possibility. But even still, he could get back to practice, could not be 100%. I don't think it's a slam dunk that he returns for that Texans game, but that's the first one where I feel like maybe it's a possibility.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that could happen. You know, the Bills generally will slow play guys coming back from injury the way they've played on the back end. There's no reason to necessarily try to get him back at the earliest possible moment. If they find a way to win this game against Baltimore, for instance, and they're sitting at 4-0, and there's any question about, well, should we give them another week? I think they give them another week. But having the Texans week is kind of circled on that calendar, if he's good to go, that's a great timeline. Friendly fire, it looked like when that injury occurred. It looked like Taylor Rapp is the one that kind of collided with him in that game 1 matchup. But it's good to hear that he's getting nearer and nearer a return. Same with Terrell Bernard. Neither will suit up in this Sunday night game, but sooner rather than later, two big pieces to this defense are going to come back.
Indeed. What was there was a couple other updates we got to get into here. Tylen Grable,
Yeah.
it's interesting. Actually, one of the insiders, couple of insiders pointed out to me over the last couple of days on the pre-Dolphins, Chris Brown on the radio interview with Joe Brady, or it might have been on One Bills Live. I'm not sure. He asked about Tylen Grable and him playing or getting active over Ryan Vandermark. And Brady revealed that Grable won the swing tackle job out of camp. That is a huge development. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that we've been super high on over the last couple of years, Ryan Vandermark. I thought he had another really good preseason. That's a big deal to have your 6th round pick win that job. Of course, he gets injured in this last game, a core groin type injury. He's going to be out multiple weeks. Sean McDermott revealed today. We'll see, what the timeline looks like there, but they do have Vandermark ready and waiting. He kind of jumps back into that spot. And I wonder how much that Grable winning it out has something to do with maybe he was a little bit more fluent going right to left. We know that was one issue with Vandermark over the years, and Grable has some guard flexibility as well.
I think that played a huge role because, Tylen Grable was not bad at training camp. He's been great through 3 games, but he had some rookie lumps, some rookie moments where, like you said, I thought Vandermark had a really good summer, a really good preseason. Looked ready to ascend into that swing tackle job. But the Bills, obviously, in their evaluations, saw Grable win that out. But now you have Vandermark, who, maybe he has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder coming back into this now to kind of show his worth in that swing tackle role. It probably, in my opinion, was the left and right in terms of really good at left tackle. Has had some moments or letdowns at right. He doesn't have the guard flexibility. All those things probably factored into the decision on Grable winning that job out of camp. But now Grable's out of the picture for a few weeks. So this is a big opportunity for Ryan Vandermark and this, this O-line that has looked fantastic as a whole through 3 weeks.
Donnybrook brings up a really good question here over on YouTube. He's an OG. He's been in the comments here for years on the Shout podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Hit that like and subscribe buttons. How are the Bills underdogs? I'll take that bet all day. I'm putting a C note down on the Buffalo Bills against the Ravens on the road. So I don't know if they're technically underdogs, Ryan. So the home team gets 3 points. They open as a 2.5 point favorite. And I'm pretty sure the early money came in on the Bills because I saw in some places as low as like down to -1.5.
Right.
So I think this is like a pick'em game, right? 2 AFC powerhouses. I know the Ravens are sitting there at 1-2. I think they're better than that. I think they played a Kansas City team in week 1 really close. If 1 or 2 plays goes differently, maybe they win that one. Who was the week 2 game where they lost?
The Raiders, which was a bizarre one.
It was a bizarre kind of game thrown in there, but I thought that they played really well for the most part. But that's the thing about the Ravens. Even when they get up, we saw it a couple of years ago against the Bills.
Yeah.
There's always that potential for them to blow it in the 4th quarter. What did you see that stat that was on the TV? I can't remember what it was now.
Like the most like blown
John
leads.
Harbaugh led team. It was like their record, something like crazy with like a 10. They've blown the most since John Harbaugh became coach. I think this is it. Don't quote me. They've blown the most 10 or more point or the most 10-point 4th quarter leads in the NFL during his tenure. Something along those lines. I had to go back and look at it.
There's a really good coach in second on that list too, if I remember it correctly. But yeah, it's fascinating in terms of the point spread. I look at it as more of a pick'em game. I look at it as the Ravens are coming off of a win. They're a little bit more desperate at 1-2. Chance for them to get themselves in a good spot within their division based on the Bengals being 0-3, the Browns being the way that they are. The Steelers, though, off to a hot start, which eventually I expect them to come back to earth. But this matchup with Derrick Henry, with Lamar Jackson and the way he can run the ball, it poses a different threat than anything that they faced through the first 3 weeks. Week 1, Arizona has a very good running back in James Conner, but that is not the focal point of that offense. Devin Achane has had some production against the Bills, but they're known as a pass-heavy offense in Miami. And then you can say the same thing for Jacksonville. Travis Etienne, even Tank Bigsby, it's a nice 1-2 punch, but it's Trevor Lawrence in that passing attack. with Baltimore, with Derrick Henry especially, they're going to try to run the ball a lot, and the Bills have a light front in terms of, Ed Oliver being a lighter defensive tackle, the two linebackers, their base defense that we see out of them quite a bit. I think it poses a big challenge to the Bills in this matchup, and how they respond is going to be, it's going to be fun to see how Bobby Babich prepares for this game, what his answer is for slowing down Derrick Henry. Something I feel the Bills did a very good job of last year when he was in Tennessee in a blowout win for Buffalo. But I think that the way that the Ravens can attack the Bills is a little bit different than what we've seen over the first 3 weeks, which might play a little bit into the spread.
I want to get into Josh Allen real quick. Richard on the insider text line asked any more updates with the hand, and so I asked Josh about that today. Just what's gone into the backhanded handoffs. You saw it multiple times in the game, and he kind of joked at first. It was like, just trying to get some extra style points, and he laughed about it, and then kind of, said that it's to limit pain. Like later as the game goes along, he's playing with whatever that injury ends up being, and he still hasn't specified that. And maybe we won't get a specification. We'll see how long, that thing, he said he's getting better every single day. But over the course of the game, you're just trying to be extra careful about how many times you take a hit on that thing and trying to really protect it. So it's something he's still dealing with. It's a part of things. I don't necessarily know. The one piece of it that's interesting is, like, I thought he ran really well against the Jags on Monday Night Football. It wasn't a huge part of the game. I think he only ran, 4 or 5 times for the 44 yards. But if it forces him to be a little bit more thoughtful when he is out in space and running, I really think that's might be a sneaky good thing for the Bills, because you never know. Like when they get to the point of the game where maybe they're down a score, maybe it's the fourth quarter, or he's kind of pressing for something, maybe he goes a little bit extra and totally discards the injury and hurdles a guy, takes on a linebacker, whatever. But in the meantime, I think like the ability to slide, I wish he would slide better in more situations. Like sometimes that he slides and it turns into that halfway slide where your body falls in a weird way. It's almost like you want to dive head first, but then you remember at the last second that you're a quarterback, and then you adjust, and then you go kind of it's like, when you were on the slip and slide as a kid and you maybe just took the wrong launch angle and you come down flying sideways and it's horrible and you get brush burns and it's terrible. That's what I feel like. I think Hard Knocks, the Chicago Bears, maybe they haven't done a lot of things right over the last couple of years under Matt Eberflus. And I know they've, got a couple draft picks there, but the slip and slide with the quarterbacks, nice. Like that one slide that Josh had in the red zone, that was pretty sweet.
Absolutely. So, first with Josh's hand, we'll probably never know exactly, at least not until probably after the season or after it's 100%, what's going on with it. The fact that we're seeing those backwards handoffs, though, is something interesting nonetheless. The fact that he, though, has only taken one QB hit in the last 2 games, that likely or should at least be helping with the healing process. I know you take a lot of snaps under center. Probably doesn't feel too good on that left hand, but at least over the last 2 weeks, it's been a promising sign with the way that Allen has been able to play without taking any extra hits to that hand or just to his body in general. So, going into this matchup, though, Lamar can hurt you with his legs. The Bills have been very good with controlling the edges, making sure he doesn't get outside of the pocket. That could limit them a little bit in terms of how they want to rush him, because if you rush off the edge and you go by him, that opens up that lane, and we know how dangerous he is. One thing working in Buffalo's favor, at least early this week, we have to see how the rest of the week plays out, is 3 of their starting offensive linemen did not practice today, Matt, in Baltimore. That's an interesting development. It's something to watch. It's something to monitor. Even if 1 or 2 of them are out on Sunday Night Football, that could be a big advantage for the Bills in terms of clogging up the run lanes early, limiting what Henry can do. But this is going to be an interesting chess match for the Bills and for the Ravens. I'm looking forward to this game quite a bit.
We'll get mostly into this game on our preview episode later in the week. I think that's going to be on Friday. But yeah, you look at the injuries on that offensive line. I mean, the Dallas front didn't do a great job getting pressure on Lamar. I mean, 8 total pressures, 7 hurries, no sacks in that game. I think the Bills, one of the little like sneaky keys is like you got to affect Lamar a little bit. You got to hit him. You
Yep.
got to make him think about some things early in the game. Like when he gets out to a start like he did against Dallas, I mean, that first drive, it's exactly what Baltimore wants to be, right? They want to put you in a bind with Henry and Lamar Jackson and get out in space. We're going to see that. And one big player to watch is in this game is going to be Von Miller, who is just absolutely getting after it to start the season. 3 sacks. He's trying to earn all the incentives, Ryan, that the Bills kind of set up with his new restructured contract this year. I think it goes up to like 20 million is like the
Right.
most that he can kind of earn. A lot of that, if not all of that, will get tacked on to next year's cap. And there's some levers the Bills can pull to kind of figure that out on the other side of things. But, you know, I think if you're saying that Von Miller ends up the season with 17 sacks, I think the Bills are taking that because that tells you that they have a fierce pass rusher in 2024 to help them, you know, kind of close things out in the playoffs. I was talking to AJ Epinesa today and I asked him, like, you know, it felt like a dark Von in the summer, in the offseason. Like he didn't seem the same around the facility, you know. He would still be at the card table. They play the Uno game at the card table in the locker room. He'd still be doing that, but it just seemed like a different version. The guy that first got here to Buffalo was the mayor. You know, everywhere he went in the building, it was all smiles, and he would go up to the podium and you'd ask him 3 questions in a 15 to 18-minute press conference. He just was talking. Like it was great, honestly, like when he first got here, but it hasn't been that. And I've seen the flip switch for him to, okay, I can still do this at a high level. I'm getting production. It feels like he's having fun again. And like AJ Epinesa said today, is like, feels like Von's Von again, which I think is so huge that even his own teammates are kind of seeing the revival, not just on the field, but behind the scenes.
You know, I think he probably battled the is Von Miller still Von Miller in his own head because of how he played last season. And, you know, he looked back on it and said, I probably shouldn't have been playing. I probably, it wasn't his best football. He's the first to admit that. There was some national talk that this was a bad contract at this point. They weren't going to get their money's worth out of him. And I'm sure all of that played a big factor into what we're seeing through 3 weeks, where even when he isn't sacking the quarterback, he's disrupting plays. We saw him just miss out on sacks a few times against Trevor Lawrence and against Tua in week 2, while still producing 1 in each of those games as well. So he is looking more and more like his old self. And I'm sure like I said, part of this is like in his own head, he's a Hall of Famer, first ballot type of guy. But he didn't want to end his career the way that it went last season in Buffalo. And, you know, he could have walked away. He could have left a lot of money on the table and called it a career. But he wanted to put in that extra work in terms of making sure he was all the way back from that injury and show what he could still do, that he could still be an effective pass rusher in his mid 30s, which he's done so far for the Bills this year, is in a like a reserve role where they're putting him out there when they know it's a have to have it type of situation. That's perfect for Von Miller.
Got a lot of stuff in the insider text line. Some questions came back when we said we were going live tonight, so I wanted to hit a couple of those. First of all, RJ, our good buddy, shout out to him, regular at our live shows, loyal insider subscriber. What's up, RJ? Hope you're watching live. If not, hear it on the playback. He asks, all right, everybody's making this 3-game stretch a big deal for the Bills coming up, right? And rightfully so. It's a 3-game stretch against contender after contender after contender. What are your thoughts on, okay, maybe if the Bills don't have the most success, is that like something that will deflate everything? What are our thoughts on this stretch and how important it is to the overall success of the Bills this season?
You know, a 1-game slip up here or there's to me shouldn't be the end of the world the way that they played after 3 weeks. But over this 3-game stretch, I think winning 2 out of 3 is the goal. To them, it's going to be 3 out of 3. But if the Bills win 2 out of 3 of these games, they're in a really good spot after a pretty strenuous on paper 6-game stretch to start the season. I think that would exceed a lot of expectations. I had them at 3-0 going into this game against the Ravens. In my predictions, the Ravens game was their first loss. This is just one of those matchups to me that's a coin flip type of game. So If the Bills do kind of fall, I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it would just be another one of those close games, which I think that the Ravens can kind of grind it out with the Bills. But I wouldn't overanalyze it if that were to be the case on Sunday Night Football. I think that we've seen a lot of really good things through the first 3 weeks, offensively, defensively, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where they've been missing some key pieces, knowing that very soon 2 of them are going to be back.
You know, the biggest key is like the complementary football piece that we've seen consistently so much over the first 3 games, right? Like it hasn't been a game where one side of the ball has had to carry the other. I mean, both sides are kind of holding up their end of the bargain. That's got to happen over these 3 games. And each team has a really good defense and a good quarterback. And when you're facing those 2 components week after week after week, I mean, that could take a lot out of you. To me, I think the goal has to be at minimum coming out of this stretch at 4-2. That's got to be, because and really the priority for me, you want it, how I'm approaching this, if I'm Sean McDermott, and I know he would never say this, but just in my head trying to put it through the grinder here. I think you have to win that Jets game. Like that to me is the most important game of the bunch, because of course it's a divisional game, but also like the Jets have a really kind of cushy start to their schedule. I mean, they could probably be sitting here with a win over the Bills at 6-1. And who knows, 7-1, 8-1. You never know how far it could go. So I feel like if you can win that game and then get one of these other 2, but really to me, that game is the most important game. I just think the Bills play well in close games, as evidenced by the fact that they've won 42 straight at 1-score games, I believe. And that's another, or what is it? What's
they haven't lost like
by
any of these games by more than 6 points. Like any of the games that they lost have been within 6 points. It's an NFL record, I believe, already. And they just keep, it is. And they just keep extending it with each game, whether they're winning in a blowout fashion or when, if they lose, it's just by such a close amount that they're in every one of these games. And that's one of the most promising things to me. And, to your point, the Jets game is the most important of this 3-game stretch for the first reason you mentioned. It's an AFC East division rival. And it's really, at this point, Matt, it's probably their only competition for the division title this year. I'm ready and willing to say this Dolphin season is over based on the fact that I saw what Skylar Thompson did before he got hurt, and it was not very good.
Tyler Huntley's coming to the rescue.
Huntley has some upside in his game. There's some things he does very well, but I don't think he's going to be the savior for this offense either. And by the time Tua comes back, whenever that is, I think they're going to have dug such a big hole that they're not going to come out of it. And we know the Patriots, for as impressive as that week 1 win was over the Bengals, how they hung tight with Seattle in week 2, we kind of got to see a little bit of what they're probably going to look like more times than not based on their week 3 performance against the Jets. There's a lack of talent on that roster, and as well as I think they're being coached up this year early on, that catches up to you at a certain point in time.
Man, the run game against the Baltimore Ravens this year has just not gone well for any team. I mean, Isaiah Pacheco, 15 carries for 45 yards, 27 total rushing yards for the Raiders in week 2, and then 51. Zeke and Dowdle combined for 38 rushing yards. So to me, that's another thing. Like, can the Bills run against this team? The Bills have to run against this team. Like, I think that, like, for as much as we're going to talk about the Baltimore running game this week, we'll get some of the more. I'm jumping the gun here, Brian. I'm getting into this matchup. And rightfully so. It's a fun matchup to talk about.
No, it is. But you're right. They do have to run the ball, whether it's James Cook, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson. They might have to get creative with it. End arounds. They might have to have multiple guys in the backfield, whether it's like a Curtis Samuel lined up back there with a James Cook. They have to try to catch the Ravens off guard a little bit because they're very good in terms of run defense, as evidenced through these first 3 games. And the beauty of Buffalo's running backs is they can run between the tackles, but they also have enough speed to get to the outside. So what does Joe Brady see in those first 3 games that maybe he feels other teams haven't tried yet or tried to exploit yet that could work for these guys? And while it's not a true run, some of those passes that Josh Allen is making at the line of scrimmage or just beyond the line of scrimmage, that's essentially a run play when you think about it, at the starting point for these players when he's dropping it off to James Cook, pressure's coming, drops it off to him, and then he lets Cook have that open space. It's not always going to a running back in those cases, but sometimes the short passing game can be just as good or effective as a run game.
Andy O'Donnell asked, why has Jamarcus Ingram been playing over Kyer Elam? Does the staff like him better as a player? Can Kyer not play the slot at all? Ingram has taken advantage of his opportunity for sure, but I wonder if Kyer would have done the same. So I think there's a couple things here. The Bills have never even tried Kyer Elam to this point in the slot, in any practice, any type of situation. By the way, side note, what's going on over there in Ole and Ryan? You're very up on the camera right now. You're a little bit off to the left. What's going on?
I don't know. I think my camera setup was like I have it too high, so I'm trying to sit up a little bit. So now I am a little bit closer to the camera.
You got me off guard.
Yeah,
a little bit with the way, because you're like, yeah, there you go. Come on in. Oh my God, the screenshot, the memes that are coming.
I'm sure.
Me. That put a lot of fear into my heart. So thank you for that. I'm not going to sleep well. I'm going to have nightmares. So that's first of all. I don't think Kyer is a slot kind of player. I also don't think the strength of Kyer's game. I think he's a willing tackler. I wouldn't call him at this stage of his career a great tackler. In that role that Ingram is playing, when you got to be up in the box, you got to be really physical. If they do decide to run, you got to be able to hold up in that area as well. And then just the coverage piece of it. I mean, being a zone third safety in a dime look when the Bills run a lot of zone in that spot, I just don't think that's the strength of Elam's game yet. It's taken him so long to get comfortable on the boundary to throw another thing in there. I just think it's a little bit too much, and he's banged up now.
I mean, you look at his confidence right now. I know he hasn't been playing much this season in the regular season. He came in last week, but over the summer, Matt, at training camp, the way he was playing, I've never seen his confidence higher. So if you were to say, hey, we're going to throw you into the slot, a spot that we really haven't prepared you for, I could see that confidence level, go right back down again if he has a misplay, if he gives up a big yardage on a play. He's talented enough, but his size is more built to be on the outside. Jamarcus Ingram's been in the system so long that he knows the ins and outs, inside, outside, can do a little bit of everything. It's not about liking one guy over the other. It's just about, Ingram's skill set, Ingram's tackling is better suited for that role while Taron Johnson is out.
Larry's asking how Kyer got hurt. He played 7 or 8 snaps at the end of that game. Almost had an interception that might have gone for a pick six had he been able to come away with it. But Sean McDermott said he suffered the neck injury that, put him in a limited spot today in the game. So that's something to figure out. I think we have one more question here from Tony. With a tough Ravens rushing attack, do the Bills have the power to contain the run and the play action pass, which could also be a big piece of this?
We'll find out on Sunday night is the best way I can put that, but I would be all about challenging Lamar to be more of a passer and play action. You get someone to bite, someone will be open in the middle of the field or somewhere on this field, and he can hit those shots. But trying to make him more one-dimensional, make him a pocket passer, that should be Buffalo's goal in this game. For as talented as he is, he can hit a lot of great passes at times. He also throws a lot of inaccurate balls, high passes that can be intercepted and create turnovers for this team. So I think Buffalo needs to be somewhat aggressive in terms of trying to stop the run, slow down Derrick Henry, make them one-dimensional as best they can, because that would benefit this Bills team more than anything else, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Lamar doesn't turn the ball over a ton in the passing game. I mean, you look at his game-by-game log from Pro Football Reference from last year. He had 7 interceptions. He only threw 2 interceptions in a game once in a loss, 33-31 loss to Cleveland. And then he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other games where he threw an interception. So he was clean most of the time. So I think that's a piece of it too, is like forcing him to be a passer is about trying to get him to give the ball, the extra possessions to Josh Allen. And Josh Allen shown you all season long what they're going to do in that spot. And I think the Bills, from the complimentary point I was making earlier, if you can play complementary ball and you score off turnovers and you don't give up a lot of points off turnovers, that's another way that I think on the road 3 straight weeks, that'll be a good recipe.
Yeah.
Speaking of recipes, Ryan, pick up all you need at Tops Friendly Markets to make your favorite recipes any day, anytime, day or night. And right now, it is the Tops Quarterback Blitz program happening over at Tops. Get ready to score big with Tops Quarterback Blitz from September 1st to October 12th. Shop over 25 of your fan favorite brands with your bonus plus and earn a quarterback for each one you buy. Brands like Pepsi, Powerade, Tostitos, Kraft, Gatorade, Body Armor, Sprite, Heinz, Ritz, Lipton, and many more. There's no limit to the savings you can rack up. Score touchdowns with these deals and keep the savings rolling. I'll let you
Love
stay
Tops.
rolling, Ryan. What else you got? Final
Love
thought.
Tops. Final thought, Bills fans, be here for our next podcast. We will be previewing this game, probably the game of the week, in my opinion, Sunday night, primetime. 2 AFC Titans, year in, year out, 2 teams that have been trying to knock the Chiefs off of the podium as the top team in the AFC. So stay locked in, go to Tops, get yourself a breakfast pizza Sunday morning, or maybe get one for Monday morning after that Sunday night football game, whatever you got to do. Stay locked in with us, though, Bills Mafia.
Enjoy the rest of your week. Big game Sunday in Baltimore. Take care, everybody.